Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, we're going to go through some big name free agents, starting with why Alex Bregman is the Phils' focus this offseason.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on the radio at 97.5 The Fanatic for 5 years now, talking all Philly sports. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 years, and this is my third season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure that if you're listening to this somewhere you consume podcasts, rate and review. If you're watching us on YouTube or if you're going to check us out on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. It'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's free and easy to do. And that subscribe button on the YouTube channel is the number one way to say that you enjoy the content. It's the number one thing that helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. So appreciate everyone who's done that and everyone who's going to do that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Go ahead and check out our friends there at FanDuel. Now, we're going to get into some big name free agents in today's episode. We're going to start talking about Alex Bregman. We're going to get into Anthony Santander, formerly of the Baltimore Orioles, who's a free agent who could join the Phillies in the outfield, could be a potential target for them this offseason. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about Garrett Crochet, who I'll tell you more about the content we have coming on Garrett Crochet later on this week. But let's jump right into it with Alex Bregman, because we're breaking down today why Alex Bregman seems to be the focus of the Philadelphia Phillies this offseason. Everything you hear around baseball, if you're listening to anybody, talking to anybody, like all the stuff that I'm getting back or all of the whispers that I'm hearing have been the Phillies want to trade Bohm, the Phillies want to sign Bregman. That seems to be the swap at third base. They want to go out and acquire Alex Bregman and put him in there at the hot corner, and they want to move on from 28-year-old Alec Bohm. Now, the question is, why do the Philadelphia Phillies want to do this? Why has he become what seems to be the early obsession of their offseason? And there's multiple reasons for this. We're going to start with the simple ones, which are just the numbers. As you go ahead and you look at this, and last year, 26 home runs, a .260 batting average. It's more pop than you're really ever going to get from Alec Bohm. I mean, you just look at the home run numbers. Alex Bregman had a 41 homer season back in 2019, which it feels like a while ago. I understand that, but he's done it. Like, Alec Bohm will never have a 41 home run season in his career. It's just not going to happen. The past 3 years, he's gone 23, 25, and 26 in the home run categories Alex Bregman has. And he's also gone 93 RBIs in 2022, 98 in 2023, 75 this past year. Now, that's a down year as far as RBIs are concerned. It was also a down year for the Houston Astros. And part of RBIs is having guys on base to go ahead and hit in. But the point is, you look at 22 and 23 and you say, okay, those numbers are relatively similar to what Alec Bohm is putting up in RBI numbers as a really big-time hitter in the Philadelphia Phillies lineup. The home run totals seem more consistent. So the argument would be the pop is there more. Now, here is what is a little bit troubling about Alex Bregman that I don't love. So back in 2019, in that year where he hit 41 home runs, it was an all-star and an absolute monster, he walked 119 times. Guys just stayed away from Alex Bregman. He also had great plate discipline. In 2022, he walked 87 times. In 2023, he walked 92 times. And then this past year, he walked 44 times. That is that's not ideal in 581 at-bats to walk 44 times. And it seems that he's being less selective, and the strikeout numbers have been steadily up over the past 5 seasons. So since he was a back-to-back All-Star in 2018 and 2019, he struck out 85 and 83 times those years. Went down to, 24 in 2020. That's a shortened season. But 44 in 2021, 87 in 2022, 2023, I'm going through the walks. 26 in 2020, 53 strikeouts in 2021, 77 in 2022, 87 in 2023, 86 in 2024, which, okay, you can be an all-star productive with that level of striking out, but that is not exactly the most consistent, like, oh, okay, this guy doesn't strike out type of approach. He's not 100 strikeout guy, right? But the thing with Alec Bohm is he really hasn't been either lately. He was 94 strikeouts in 2023. He was 86 in 2024. Now, in 21 and 22, he was over 110 strikeouts both times. We're talking about Alec Bohm now. So the argument would be that Alec Bohm's track record of striking out is a lot higher than Alex Bregman's. So you bring in a guy that is a more consistent contact hitter that should put together more professional at-bats, that has been in Major League Baseball for longer and also adds more pop. Now, he's an older player. He's not significantly older. He's only 30 and Bohm is 28. Remember, Bregman came up young. So you're not giving up too much age. And you've got a guy who's a two-time All-Star, a Gold Glove winner at third base, All-Star Game MVP, which doesn't really matter for anything, and a Silver Slugger at third base in Alex Bregman. When you look at Alec Bohm's numbers for that, he's a one-time All-Star, and that's his only accolade to compare with Alex Bregman, who's been doing it for a longer time, and it seems to be more proven in the numbers. So are you getting a better player? Probably, yeah. Like at this point in his career, maybe you could say Bregman's on the backside a little bit, but at 30, that's not ancient for a third baseman. It's not that difficult of a position physically to play as far as like the wear and tear. So that's okay. That's good to see. The biggest thing that I worry about is the money change of like how much you would have to pay Bohm versus how much you're going to have to pay Bregman. Do the numbers justify that? I don't think they do. Like, I don't think they justify that big of a change in salary commitment between these two players. I think Bregman's better. Do I think he's, I don't know. Let's say you go out and you give Bregman $100 million over 4 years. That'd be $25 million compared to what Alec Bohm will get in arbitration, which is probably about $8 million. Let's just call it $9 million. Is it a $16 million a year difference, Alex Bregman to Alec Bohm? I don't think so based on the numbers. So why are the Phillies so obsessed with doing this and costing themselves more money? There are two accolades that Alex Bregman has on his baseball reference page that I didn't say yet that are the main reason for this. And it is the two-time World Series champion tag. That's part of the reason that they want Alex Bregman and why he's become such a focus for this team is because they clearly view him as a guy that's just a winner. The difference in numbers are negligible, right? We just ran through them. They're somewhat comparable, and you could project out that Bohm is on the way up while Bregman could be on the way down, even though that's not a guarantee for either of those players. Bohm could have just had his best season, and Bregman could still have great seasons in him. It's not a guarantee. It just seems the way they're trending right now. So why would a smart organization, and yes, the Philadelphia Phillies, for all the annoyance they give us in the postseason, they are a very smart organization and have a great guy at the helm in Dave Dombrowski that knows how to put together championship contention rosters. Like, why would a smart organization like the Philadelphia Phillies pay $16 million for a player that's not $16 million better? It's because they believe he has a winning pedigree. That's the only possible explanation. He played out there in Houston with World Series winning teams, and he was a big part of World Series winning teams out there with the Astros. And he's a guy that has been in an organization from the jump in his major league career that's just competed. It's all he knows. So you know what happens? Like, you look at it in the NBA. What happens when a guy goes to Golden State or you get a guy from Golden State back when they were having their run, or like the way Boston is now? They play better in a winning culture, or they learn more and they bring that winning culture other places. In the NFL, back when the Patriots were winning every darn Super Bowl, you sign somebody from the Patriots, they're probably a pretty good player because they played for Belichick. I mean, you look at it and, I don't know, go to hockey and look at, I guess, the Boston Bruins. I hate to give Boston too much credit. Let's go with, I don't know, the Tampa Bay Lightning. You bring in a guy from that organization, you know they're a good hockey player because you know that they have competed for Stanley Cups year in and year out. Alex Bregman is that type of guy. And baseball is a little bit different because it's an individual team sport. So it's not just like this whole fit of the team culture is as important in this sport as it is in hockey, basketball, or football. But he's a bona fide winner. And you can't really put a stat on that, right? You look at the numbers for Alec Bohm last year, and you say, wow, this guy was really good. He was an all-star, and he did all this, and he hit that, and he had these many RBIs and homers and doubles and bang, 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 bang. And then You watch him and you say, actually watching this guy, he's clutch in the early part of the season. And then when you get later in the season, the pressure seems to get to him. The attitude is a major problem. He got sat in the second game of the playoff series. Like, all of this leads to great player, intangibles aren't there. Alex Bregman is a great player whose intangibles have been part of a World Series winning team 2 times and a big piece on that team. There are no doubts that Bregman's going to come in here and bring a winning attitude and be focused. And they also probably believe he fits really well in this locker room. There have been some whispers about there being guys in the locker room. Not that they don't like Alec Bohm as a person, but they don't like the way that he conducts himself sometimes when he's struggling. That's the biggest reason why Alex Bregman has become the Phil's focus of the offseason, because they see a guy at third base right now in Alec Bohm that they don't know if he can be a winner. And they see Alex Bregman and they say that dude has been a winner and can continue to be a winner. And the difference in the numbers is negligible, and the difference in the age is minimal, and we'll pay him more if he goes ahead and brings that more of that winning culture here to Philadelphia. So that's why Alex Bregman is the biggest free agent potential acquisition for the Philadelphia Phillies that they're looking at right now. That's the guy they're going after. That's the dude they want. And those are the reasons why, at least in my opinion. Maybe we'll hear something different from the Phillies as the offseason continues and if they sign him and explain why they did. But that seems to make the most sense to me. Let me know in the comments if you believe that's why they're interested in Bregman. And also, if you look at Bregman as an upgrade over Bohm, the numbers, honestly, closer than I thought, especially after Alec Bohm had a career year in 2024. Coming up next, we're going to get into a look at another player that's been with a good organization, or an organization that has become good recently, and a guy that high risk, high reward in the outfield. Could the Phillies be interested in Anthony Santander? We'll discuss as we continue today's episode. Well, let's talk about FanDuel first, because you got to be ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And here's why you need FanDuel right now. You know what I'm doing? I'm getting ready to set my lineup for the first week of fantasy football playoffs. And I know that a lot of you are not in your fantasy football playoffs. And that's just a numbers game. Like 4 or 6 teams make it, but not everybody does. So if you want to keep things interesting now that your fantasy football season could be over, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started again with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's look at – this is a very interesting guy to me, Anthony Santander, because he is one of the more underrated true power hitters in baseball. Or is he a true power hitter? Is he just a big-time season in the right time? He had never been an all-star in his career until 2024, but he'd had some good seasons. Just interesting that 44 home runs and an all-star season comes in a contract year that makes a guy very, very tough to evaluate. He just got himself paid. The question is, by who? And is it the Philadelphia Phillies? And does he add too much of the same to the Philadelphia Phillies roster? Now, if you're not familiar with Santander, he's a switch-hitting guy with pop that plays down in Baltimore, or played down in Baltimore. He's okay defensively. He's a corner outfielder. He's been an all-star one time this past year. He won a Silver Slugger one time. And he is a career 246 hitter, which is the biggest problem with seeing Santander on this Philadelphia Phillies team. You have guys that are going to hit for power in Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper. And Harper could do it hitting 300. But you also have a guy in Nick Castellanos that, if you don't move on from, who's already in the corner, that's going to bat around that 250 probably mark, maybe 260. And he's going to hit maybe 20 bombs, but strike out a bunch. He's going to be that doubles gap-to-gap guy. Santander is going to be a homer guy. Now, you might say, as Citizens Bank Park, the homer numbers will go up. So for a guy whose numbers the past 3 years are 33 homers in 2022, 28 homers in 2023, 44 homers last year, 2024 in Baltimore, with that big extended left field section, making it harder to hit the ball out of left field as a right-handed batter. Now, I know he bats switch, but that is about half of his at-bats. You might say his numbers will go up in Philadelphia. They could. They certainly could. But I don't know that that's a consistent enough batting average to say, yo, go out there and be part of our outfield every single day, and you don't still run into the problems that you've had where it's we're in a big spot and we need a guy to just manufacture a hit. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy to me. He seems like a power hitter, and the Phillies don't really seem to have a need for a power hitter. Like, here's the thing. Alec Bohm is a career 277 hitter who hit 280 last year. And I know you might say we're not talking about third base anymore. Well, Alex Bregman is a career 272 hitter who batted 260 last year. So you're going down in batting average as far as that's concerned. If you bring in Anthony Santander, 246 career batting average, 235 last year, you're not exactly bringing in guys that are typically bringing up your batting average like people want to see the Philadelphia Phillies do. They want to see him go out and get players that put together more professional at-bats, that don't strike out as much. And look at the strikeout numbers for Anthony Santander. 122 in 2022, 152 in 2023, 129 in 2024. Like, Anthony Santander is going to be a really good player for somebody, I think. He's a great piece of a team. If you had a team, I'm trying to think of, like, you know where Anthony Santander would be great? The Cleveland Guardians. You go ahead and you add him to that team that plays small ball and creates opportunities on the base paths, and then you bring in a guy that could be like a 30 to 40 home run guy and put him in that lineup. Great, because what they're lacking outside of Jose Ramirez and Yuniesky Noel is power. But the Phillies don't lack in power. They lack in guys that are able to grind out at bats sometimes in the biggest moments of the season. And Anthony Santander just isn't really that guy. I mean, he creates doubles. That's great to see. 41 in 2023, 25 in 2024, 24 each of the past two seasons before that. But again, you're not looking at a guy that walks all that much. He was at 55, 55, and 58 over these last three seasons. You're looking at a guy who strikes out a ton, who doesn't bat for a high average, and who hits a bunch of home runs. So if you're going to it would almost be funny to see the Philadelphia Phillies say, now we're steering even further into the curve, and we're going to go ahead and get more power hitters, and we're just going to try and bring in a whole bunch of 40 home run guys and just live and die even more by the home run. It would drive us insane, but like, that's what Anthony Santander would be doing. And that's why I don't think he's a great fit for Philadelphia. Not because he's not a good player, but because he doesn't fit the mold of what you're trying to change. He feels like more of the same. And maybe Kevin Long goes to Dave Dombrowski and says, listen, man, this is my philosophy, for better or for worse. So if you don't think these players work, we'll get me different players that do the same thing. And that's kind of what we were just talking about with Alec Bohm and Alex Bregman, the last segment, where it's just like the numbers aren't that much different, but the player is different. Now, Santander doesn't really come with that whole winning pedigree. Baltimore has been good the past couple of years, but they haven't had postseason success. So do you look at that as like a guy that comes in that's, I don't know, more proven than, let's say, Brandon Marsh, who has played in the World Series before? I don't know. Yon Rojas, who has played in the NLCS before. I don't know. And listen, Santander's been around longer, but my point is there's no saying like, oh, this guy's a winner the way you can with Bregman because of his titles that he has, or the titles his team has won, just to be fair that it's the team, not just Alex Bregman, that's created that. But that Santander just doesn't make sense. He's a great player. He's a big-time name. The Phillies are absolutely a team that's going to like kick the tires on him because they need outfield help. But when you look at that, I don't think – and this is a guy that, right, like, here's how I'll view it. I don't think he changes the Phillies the way that the fan base wants the Phillies to change. If the Phillies sign Anthony Santander, I'm going to be excited because you're going to put a guy out there like Brandon Marsh couldn't hit this past year. So if you put this guy in left field and Nick Castellanos stays in right, or I don't know, you flip him vice versa, whatever the case may be, you go out there and do that, you're getting a guy that's going to take, what did Brandon Marsh hit, like 12 home runs this past year? You're going to add like 30 on that. That's pretty darn good. That'll not be something to be upset about, but the Phillies aren't here to put on 30 home runs in the regular season. They're here to find ways to make the at-bats in the postseason count more. And I don't think Anthony Santander does that enough for this team. And he's going to get a payday from somebody. Again, I just think it'll be a team like the Cleveland Guardians that are going out to look to add more pop. Maybe the Kansas City Royals would be a good spot for him to go ahead and put him in the corner outfield to add a little bit of pop to that roster outside of Bobby Witt. I don't know, but I just don't think he fits here based on the style of player that he is. So, sorry if you were a big Anthony Santander fan. That's just not what I'm looking at for the Philadelphia Phillies this offseason. And that's coming from me, right? Like, I'm a ball go boom guy. I like home runs. And if I'm saying that this guy doesn't really fit, he doesn't really fit. Because I'm comfortable with the way the Philadelphia Phillies attack the Major League Baseball thought process, right? Like, I'm cool with chasing the home run. I'm cool with boom or bust. And it hasn't worked out, but, like, that's how this team has already been built. So I lean more towards that side than the average fan. If you're an average fan who doesn't like that approach, the all or nothing approach that the Philadelphia Phillies have had the past couple of years, Santander is not the guy for you either, at least in my opinion. Now, just to give you an idea of who we're going to get into next, we're going to take a look at not Pete Alonso, not Willie Adames. No, we're going to take a look at Jack Flaherty, because Jack Flaherty is an interesting name for the Philadelphia Phillies to consider, to look at for a depth rotation piece. A guy somewhere around like the fourth or fifth starter, he could fit into that. And he's only 29 years old, so you could do a longer-term deal. He was on a one-year, $14 million deal with the Tigers, and he didn't do well. So you could get a guy with high upside cheap. That'll be someone that we'll discuss in our next free agent episode. But coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're discussing in a crossover episode tomorrow as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. All right, now Garrett Crochet is a guy that has been on the list for a lot of Philadelphia Phillies fans once you saw that the Phillies were trading Alec Bohm. And Alec Bohm has been a main theme of this episode, as he's going to be for a lot of episodes throughout this entire offseason. When you look at moving one of your top players, that's the guy you're going to talk about a lot. Now, Garrett Crochet is a really, really good pitcher. He's a guy that had a 3.58 ERA. He was 6-12 in 2024, but he had a 4.1 WAR. And how did he do it? Well, he was an all-star and pitched 146 innings and had 209 strikeouts in just 146 innings for the White Sox. You have to throw out the record book. And he doesn't get as much credit because he played on the worst team in baseball last year. That was absolutely miserable. But there's no denying this dude is a monster with strikeout stuff. And he's a power lefty that you're looking at and you say, okay, well, you got Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola to hold down the right side. You have Andrew Painter coming up to add to that, but you got lefties in Suarez, Sanchez, and now could you add Garrett Crochet through a trade? That's something that is very, very intriguing for the Philadelphia Phillies. As far as Crochet is concerned, 25 years old as well. So, like, he is a young stud that if you were to acquire him, you're immediately signing him to a long-term contract extension. And you now have Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, and Crochet that you'll lock down long-term. You'll bring up Painter. He'll be under team control forever. You can move on from Ranger Suarez. Heck, if you trade for Garrett Crochet, it might lead to another move by the Philadelphia Phillies to trade Ranger Suarez then. Now, I don't think that'll happen because I think they're going to ride that out for a year to see if you can win a World Series, and trading Ranger Suarez doesn't help you. I've talked about that in multiple episodes already this offseason, but maybe it's a midseason trade depending on how your rotation looks. Andrew Painter comes up. He looks great. You say we move Ranger Suarez. We bring in a guy that we need in the outfield or in the infield if something changes, and then you work from there. I don't know. It opens up possibilities. Adding him to the team would be a major, major win for the Philadelphia Phillies if you have another solution at third base. And it seems like Alex Bregman is a solution at third base. So you see how these pieces are starting to fall into place, and you could be looking at a significantly different baseball team in 2025 for the Philadelphia Phillies. The thing is, well, what is a 25-year-old all-star that had 200 some strikeouts and 150 some innings or whatever it was. What does that guy cost? Well, we're going to call in the expert tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to do a crossover episode with Locked On White Sox. So we're going to go ahead and talk about, because of course they want to know about Alec Bohm as well. So Todd Welter, host Locked On White Sox, he's going to join us tomorrow. Or rather, I'm going to join him. This episode will come out tomorrow afternoon. And we're going to discuss a lot of stuff, from how much Crochet could cost, what the minor league elements of a deal could be. Are the Phillies sending more? Are the White Sox sending more? What type of player is Crochet? You'll get to hear from the guy who watched him day in and day out last year. Listen, there are very few bright spots of the Chicago White Sox season. So you're going to get a lot of great information on what was the brightest spot for the White Sox and what kind of pitcher he is, how projectable he is, all of this stuff. And we're going to do the same talking about Alec Bohm. And I'm basically going to kind of sell Alec Bohm to the White Sox, saying, hey, here's why you should probably go acquire him. And he's a really great player. So maybe we could just do a 1-for-1 swap. Yeah. Now they're not going to do that. I'll ruin a little bit of this surprise for you. The Phillies trading a 28-year-old All-Star for a 25-year-old All-Star, and a guy that the Phillies are shopping because he has attitude issues, compared to a guy that the White Sox are shopping because they're not good. You're going to have to send prospects. And also because the White Sox are in a situation where they're rebuilding constantly, it feels like. They're going to want to acquire more prospects back and look at that as like, oh, okay, we're doing this trade to fill our coffers a little bit in the minor league system. You're doing this trade to compete. Therefore, ipso facto, you should be sending us prospects. So it'll be interesting. We're going to get into that, in addition to, like I was saying, who these players are, and then also who would benefit more from a Crochet-Bohm trade. Would it be pretty even? Would this play better for the Phillies? We're just going to kick around what our thoughts are. And also, I've already talked to Todd Welter, who hosts Locked On White Sox, about this episode coming tomorrow. And one thing that I know he wants to get into is something we've talked about a little bit here on Locked On Phillies, which is, guys, you got to let the trade rumors go that you see on these random, like, put together trade websites. No. If you see something on Twitter or social media or on Instagram, all these posts, when it seems far-fetched, it's not going to happen. It's probably not going to happen, at least not that way. And I'm not saying the Crochet Bohm trade is not happening. I think it's a distinct possibility that this deal gets done. I wouldn't say it's more likely than not, but I'd say that this is a legitimate, like, trade scenario, at least these two main pieces, and filling out the extra, like, bit of the trade, the ancillary pieces, is going to be what gets really interesting. But I'm interested to hear what Todd Welter thinks about Crochet, because some of my questions to him on tomorrow's episode are going to be like, was he as good as the numbers suggest? How much of this was good pitcher on a bad team, right? Does he stand out against the background of the rest of the pitching staff not being very good? Like, how do you think his makeup is for pitching on a team that's fighting for the World Series in 25? Is he prepared to step into the spotlight? Remember, the Philadelphia Phillies acquired Gregory Soto from a similar situation in Detroit before Detroit became the playoff darlings they were this last year. Excuse me. Detroit were nobodies when you traded Matt Vierling and Nick Maton for Gregory Soto and Cody Clemens. And then what ends up happening is you bring in Gregory Soto to Philadelphia and just doesn't quite ever perform here. And part of that, I think, is the pressures of pitching for a playoff organization when you're pitching in games that didn't really matter up there in Detroit. So could that happen with Garrett Crochet? These are all like the makeup questions and stuff. You only know from watching the guy. You don't really get it from looking at the box score or the baseball reference page. And we're also going to talk about his arsenal, what Alec Bohm does well. Think about all the stuff you could say about Alec Bohm if somebody hadn't really watched him to this point in his career. That's what we're going to get on Garrett Crochet in tomorrow's episode, and then we're going to workshop a trade. So going to be an awesome crossover episode. Make sure you tune in for it. Hopefully you enjoyed this breakdown of two big-name free agents. And again, one of the next guys that we're going to check in on, we're going to look at Jack Flaherty in an episode later this weekend. I think we're going to put out an episode Saturday for you guys. So we'll go ahead and take a peek at some pitchers that are going to be big-name free agent names. Not the biggest guys, but guys that you could look to acquire. By the way, just a quick Roki Sasaki thing, just as we talked about when we broke down that on our latest episode. The the big feeling around baseball seems to be he's going to the Dodgers. Shocker. We're going to have to do a ban the Dodgers from baseball episode at some point this offseason, but that's for another time and another place. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies, though. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it very much. Please make sure that you're rating, reviewing, hitting that subscribe button on the YouTube. Remember, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and you're going to want to get notifications when new episodes are posted. We're starting to hit the point of the offseason where some deals are starting to get done and some real rumors are starting to fly, not just social media stuff. So hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you tomorrow on a nice crossover episode of Locked On Phillies.